Gracie here is a dog we have. I got to say that this is kind of somewhat coordinated through Nebraska No Kill Shelter. Am I getting the name right? Who's a great organization in Nebraska. So if you're looking for a pet, they take dogs out of dangerous situations. They clean them up. They make sure they're feeling healthy, and then find them great homes like these two dogs. Well, not these two, the two that are not on camera. And so if you are looking for a dog, the Humane Society is not the only place to go. So is there a website?
Yes, NebraskaNoKill.org.
NebraskaNoKill.org. So if you're looking for a rescue dog, go there. So basically, what I want to go over in this one is Gracie is the dog that has nipped at the child when the child's running or doing things. I think she's trying to do it in a corrective way, the way it was described to me. I haven't witnessed it, but that's what I'm guessing. So in this video, I want to go over what I call escalating consequences. And these are ways that we disagree with the dog using, and I extrapolated these basically after observing how dogs interact with each other. First thing I do is actually not nonverbal. It is using a hissing sound, like a cat. I use that for two reasons. Number one, there's no question who we're talking to. Don't hiss at your husband. It will not work on humans. Number two, cats, skunks, snakes, cougars, mountain lions, even bunny rabbits make a hissing sound as a warning. So even if these dogs have never met any of those creatures, their natural inclination is to stop. The hiss works best if you do it before the dog does the wrong thing. Now we have a parent here that's filming, and as a parent, you have a superpower. You see your child, it's like watching TV, and you're like, don't pick your nose. I wasn't picking my nose. You see it happening before it happens. That's one of the dirty secrets of dog behavior. So if the dog is coming over and not allowed to on the couch now, and I'm walking over, running over the couch, I know I'm going to run up. When the dog is about a foot away from the boundary, or two if it's running, I would hiss at that point. I have 10 hisses. I have a level 1 hiss, which is like, tss, a little bit hard of hearing when we're older. Then I have a level 10 hiss. Watch this dog. So we want to moderate the intensity of our hiss based on what the intensity is, and Stormy even walked away on that one.
Did.
So if you ever have like a football coach who yelled at you all the time for everything, after a while the yelling doesn't get a rise out of you. So we want to have nuance in our correction. Now if I hiss more than once, then after a while the dog's just going to ignore that as well. So only hiss one time per incident, matching your energy level or intensity with the dog's energy level. Let's say the dog was walking towards me, I'm eating something, and I hiss before it gets to the boundary, it turns and walks away. But then I open up some sweet and sour mustard, and the dog's like, oh, I love that. Comes back a second time. If I hiss again, I'm watering it down. So what I'm going to do now, the second thing I do is I'm going to abruptly stand up. When dogs communicate through each other with movement, it's one big, bold, sudden movement. So can you see this dog in the shot? So just keep it where it is. Don't worry, I'm going to get up, but we should see a response. Well, I'm not as nimble on my feet. You can come up a little bit higher so we can see my face.
Yep.
But basically for dogs, this is my I mean business position. Like we talked about in the earlier video, burning energy to stand up. Now when you stand up, this is, like I said, I mean business, but your authority is directional. It goes whatever direction your hips are pointed. Right now my authority is pointed here. Now what a dog typically does when you stand up abruptly is they're going to take a step backwards. They want what I call escapability. So they're going to take a step backwards. Then the second thing they're going to do is what I do when I'm on the freeway and a police officer gets behind me is I'm going to immediately change lanes to see, are they following me? If the police officer follows me, then I know I was probably speeding or doing something I shouldn't do, and I need to pay attention and drive very safely. So what the dog will do is it's going to take a step backwards, and then it's going to move to see, is she talking to me, or did she just get stung in the butt by a bee, and that's why she bounced up so fast? So when the dog walks away, if I don't pivot and track the dog with my hips, it literally walked away from my authority. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do this while I'm moving my feet and just pivot and wait for that dog to be stationary. As soon as the dog's stationary, I take 2 steps backwards. So the guardian's nodding her head. She remembers this from before. When you take 2 steps backwards, that's my way of saying I'm dialing down my confrontation with you. So the conversation, if I were to translate this, the dog's like, ooh, you have good chicken nuggets. Hiss, you better stay away from my nuggets. Okay, I'll move away. Oh, but then she opened up something I really like. I got to go back. Now I stand up. Ooh, she's talking to me? Oh, yeah, she's talking to me. How do I communicate that I don't want to challenge anymore? I'm going to stop. And as soon as the dog stops, it can stand in place, sit, or lie down. As soon as it does that, you want to take 2 steps back. Just 2 steps. Keep your hips pointed at the dog, and after about a 1-second pause, then you can go back to doing what you're doing. You could also sit down, but sitting is a more subordinate position like I talked about earlier. A lot of times the dog will come back a second time. So we're going to stand up abruptly. The third consequence, Stormy is breathing a little heavy. The third consequence is giving and taking territory. And this is a big part of how dogs communicate with each other. So if I, first of all, for a dog, if I just march at you directly like this is a very confrontational movement for a dog. Front-facing greetings almost always result in some sort of a problem. If two balanced dogs do it, they'll turn their heads to the side and yawn, which is called a calming signal. Now, if a polite dog, if I'm a dog that's polite and I want to approach, I would kind of do like this. I would do a little bit of a curve. Or I would go around and come to your midsection and then sniff butts and crotches, and that's something we never want to interrupt dogs from doing unless one of the dogs doesn't like it. So for a dog, this is confrontational, sideways is approachable, behind you, you're defenseless. So if I march at the dog and the dog backs up a mile, but it's still facing me, it's still challenging. So if I'm marching at I'm playing the part of a dog here, if the human is marching at me, if I want to communicate, I understand, I'm going to turn to the side to say, I'm stop challenging you. Or I can turn greater. So as soon as the dog turns sideways, you want to stop. Now this looks indecisive if you can see my feet here. So I would either complete my movement or I would retract my movement, keep my feet together, and now I'm pivoting and going back to that second consequence until the dog is stationary, then I take those 2 steps backwards. Now when I say march at the dog, a lot of people think I mean stomping, and I don't mean stomping, I'm moving briskly towards them. If you've ever been in a hallway and you're looking at your phone and you look up and somebody's there and you kind of flinch, that's the experience you have to give your dog. It works best if you're moving quickly or briskly at the dog, very deliberately. Now I see a lot of people, what they do is they march at the dog and then they slow down and stop in front of the dog. So they get like here and the dog's like, well, I don't even look because you stopped yourself. The dog needs to think, if I'm still here, when the human gets here, the human is running me over. So I better get out of the way, like I talked about in the other video, deferring to leadership. So that's the third consequence. Now the only time this wouldn't apply is one of the rules we have is the dogs are not allowed to be within 7 feet of somebody's eating. So we have somebody playing the part, pretending here, of eating. So let's say there's a 7-foot boundary here. Let's say the line goes to here, for example. And so if I'm a dog and I walk towards her, and you don't have to do anything, but if she were to get up, you saw he stopped and looked. Yeah. So if she were to get up and march at me and I turn sideways right away, well, the line is still here. I'm not supposed to be in this area because somebody's eating. So at this point, I would ignore that the dog turned sideways and bump into the dog until it crosses the line. Once the dog crosses this line, I stop at the line. That's how I establish where an imaginary line is. Now these dogs are smaller, so the guardians wouldn't do it, but if you have a bigger dog, I see a lot of people do this, and they get to where the dog is, they walk like this, which is a really funny walk, but just walk through the dog normally. Again, the dog's job is to defer and get out of your way. So that's the third escalating consequence. The fourth escalating consequence I have is putting the dog on what I call a leash timeout. We have a parent here very familiar with this concept. So what we do is as these dogs are all small, I want to step on them. Can you wait right there for a sec? I just want to wrap up this video real quick. That sound will, yes. The fourth consequence is I put the dog on a leash and I step on it, giving it just enough room to stand or sit. Now, most dogs will throw a temper tantrum. Just ignore it. Don't say no, don't do anything, just wait. And it's a good way to burn energy. As soon as the dog is done, then we want to take the foot, they'll sit down as far away as they can. Dogs have something called an opposition reflex. So if you pull on the leash, they will automatically, guaranteed, pull against you, which is why you don't want to pull them into position on a walk because you just have tug-of-war. So in this case, I'm standing on it. So the dog sits as far away as it can. I don't tell it to sit, and I don't tell it to lie down. When it sits on its own and I'm restricting its movement, it's saying I'm challenging you less. When it lays down, it's saying I surrender. Now when it sits down, it's going to sit with the tense leash. So if it sits here, I take the foot that's on the leash, and if you want to get my feet, slide it towards the dog to take the tension off of the leash. And then I wait for the dog to lay down. Sometimes it's a minute later, sometimes it's several minutes later. When the dog lays down and is calm, then I take my foot off the leash. Now it's dangerous to have your dog on a leash, dragging around unsupervised. They can get hung up on something and injure themselves. So never do that unsupervised. But if the dog goes back to trying to nip or doing some unwanted behavior, as it runs by, we step on the leash, we reapply the consequence. But if a couple minutes later go by and the dog's good, then we can take the leash off. It's not quid pro quo. What we're saying is if you're defiant, the consequence is you lose all freedom. I warned you not to do it by hissing at you. You did it anyway, so I stood up. You did it again, so I marched at you. You did it again, so you lost all freedom to the house. And when the dog returns to a completely calm state, freedom is restored. These are, it's important that you use these in order. Now, sometimes, let's say that I had foot surgery or something and I spilled some drugs on the floor. I might hiss, stand up, and rush at the dogs all simultaneously. That's combining them, and that makes a much stronger move. But the one thing we want to make sure we do is always start with your hiss. At first, you'll have to hiss, then stand up, then march, and then leash time out. After a while, it'll just be hiss, stand up, march, then just hiss, stand up, then just hiss. The other day, my dog Callie had caught a squirrel. I hissed at her and she dropped the squirrel. She knew that I would follow through. But if you're consistent with this, after a while, all you have to do is just a hiss. So these are what I call escalating consequences, and these are how we can disagree with unwanted actions or behaviors out of the dog.